Welcome, Kelly.
Awesome, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. I know everyone's very excited for this session. So first off, I want to thank everyone for attending today's New York City Department of Ed Beyond Access Forum. And a special thank you. Oh, let me go back to all of today's sponsors. Obviously, without the support of our sponsors, these events are not possible. I want to remind everyone to visit our partner booths. After this session, we are going into closed marks and we will be pulling some winners for our passport to prizes. We're giving away about 25 different prizes. I also want to remind you that you can go into the conference hub and network with today's attendees via the registrant directory. So you can actually book meetings with each other and also chat. All of today's sessions are being recorded. It will be in the conference resources section of the conference hub. If you have questions during today's session, feel free to use the chat unless Cornelius tells you he wants you to unmute yourself and talk, then that's a different story. And then also remember to use today's conference hashtag NYC Schools with an S inclusion in any of your social media posts. I will also drop in the chat box the information for CTLE credit because I know everybody wants CTLE credit, and that will be in the chat box in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Cornelius because I know he wants every second. You're on
All
mute.
right. Yes. Well, thank you so much. I am just so thrilled to be here with all of you. And I'm just going to get right into it. Now, one of the things that's been really important for me is I spend most of my time with children and young people. And so I run a fast and loose and interactive session. So this will not be 45 minutes of me talking at you. Rather, this is going to really be us thinking together really about all that we face in this contemporary moment. One of the things that I have been thinking lots about is that school is profoundly different right now for so many of us. And so really what I wanted to explore with you today is this idea of what it means to do school right now. And as I think about all of this, I cannot start this presentation by just saying that I see you. So teachers in this room, I see you, school leaders in this room, I see you, everybody who works in a school with children. And the work has been unprecedented. The work has been difficult and tricky. And so I cannot start any presentation without just acknowledging the beauty and intellect and capacity that all of you bring to this work. I think now more than ever, it is integral that we recognize and appreciate those who work closely with our children. And again, any presentation that attempts to get started without just acknowledging how powerful teachers are is a presentation that I don't want to be a part of. And so I definitely want to acknowledge all of the powerful work that you all are doing today. And I wanted to draw some specific context for the work that we're doing today, that as educators, it is no secret that we are working through the greatest period of professional uncertainty in the last decade, that what we are attempting to do right now has never been done before. And so as I engage in work every day, as I engage in work with you, one of the things that I wanted to name right away is that what we are doing will not be perfect or predictable. In many instances, it will not even be comfortable. So as I chart the way forward for my students and for my community, I am thinking how I pivot into that place where I am not expecting perfect. That this current pandemic and the shift to remote and hybrid learning has revealed to many what educators representing historically marginalized groups have been articulating for years. And that is the reality that there are profound inequities in schooling. So while we're dealing with pandemic, we are also dealing with our complicated and shared history. But then here's the tricky part, and this is where a lot of my frustration comes in, that some people in our communities mistake knowing about the issues facing school communities for actually doing community work. And those of us gathered here today know that knowing is completely different than doing. And I am here really to work with you this 45 minutes to really lean into the doing. What does it mean to educate all kids in this moment right now? And as we wrestle with that, I want to go ahead and start with a really powerful truth for me. That so many people come to me, I spend my time as a literacy coach and people come and they're like, Cornelius, what's the one best way forward? How do we do this thing in the one best way that's going to work for all kids? And I wanted to dispel that myth right here in the beginning, that there is no such thing as the one best way forward. But as we consider the path forward together this afternoon, each path does have some essential components. Again, there is no such thing as the one best way forward. We all work in different classrooms, in different contexts, in different communities, and with different students. And as we plan the way forward does have some essential components. There is incredible self-work that we do in this moment where we examine ourselves, what we bring to the classroom, our skills, because we have to retool those things. But then also there's systemic awareness, understanding the multiple challenges and systems of oppression that exist outside of school, and understanding how those things make their way into our own classrooms. Of course, there is also the work of active change making, that we can't just identify and know about the things that challenge or plague students, but we have to grow our capacity to actually build that change. And we'll be doing so much of that work this afternoon. And then finally, all of that rests on a foundation of powerful teaching, that this work is nothing that if we cannot teach literacy and math and art and science and history and band in powerful ways. And so I'm always thinking about the foundation of powerful teaching. Now, I want to start in a really powerful way. It's election day, so I also can't ignore that, right? And on your screen, you see one of my heroes, our foremother, Fannie Lou Hamer. She is the one pictured in the center, and she's a wonderful person to know about. She fought for the right to vote for women and for Black folks years ago. She is known as one of the principal organizers of the Freedom Rides. In 1964, she ran for state office in Mississippi, but she was banned from being on the ballot because she was a woman and because she was Black. And when I reflect on today, and I think about all that is election day, I'm actually wearing her illegal campaign t-shirt right now, but as I reflect on all that she endured, one of the things that sticks with me is her assertion that we are humans first. And when we face impossible situations, we are allowed to be angry and sad and scared. So as we work even through this pandemic, I think it's important to name that as teachers who are working and facing impossibility in so many ways, again, we are allowed to be angry, we are allowed to be sad, we are allowed to be unsure, we are allowed to be scared, that all of these things are very human feelings. And as such, they are appropriate. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and he was like, well, Cornelius, when are you going to get over it? Like, you just can't be angry about this. And I don't think we have to get over it. Like, we don't have to get used to this reality. That I am profoundly interested in forging a reality that is good for children and good for us as we seek to lead children and to teach children. And so that's our day today. Now, I realize that I can't build our day without looking at some additional context, that at the same time that I am an educator, I am also a father, right? So I teach and coach teachers all day while my kids are 6 feet away from me doing school themselves. And all of the stresses and responsibilities that come with parenting are with me and with us in this room right now. And so many of us have had to get used to these Brady Bunch size realities, right? Like where we see our students and our colleagues in these Zoom style boxes in the days that we're not in the building. And so I wanted to name that this is a very real context that we are working through, but we're also working again through this incredibly historic moment where now more than ever, our kids are aware of issues of justice and inequality in the world. So even as a father, I am helping my own 2 daughters to work through the historical and social anxiety of this moment, but then also trying to preserve the beauty and the wonder of childhood. So I spend time working with my kids, my own daughters, right, at ages 6 and 8, on the meaning of justice and what it means for 2 Black biracial girls who are growing up in New York City. But then at the same time, I spend time blowing bubbles off the roof and playing Animal Crossing. And all of those things make their way into this presentation today, that we cannot just talk school without talking about the heaviness of our lives. And so here's what I prepared for you today. I have been thinking lots about, again, what it looks like moving forward, especially because the world outside of our window right now does not look like the world that we prepared to enter. Even this picture, I live in Fort Greene in Brooklyn, and when the recent protests resumed in the wake of George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor's murder, the major protest route in Brooklyn went underneath my daughter's bedroom window. And so each night as I tucked my daughters into bed, we went to bed with the sound of protesters out the window. And in this picture, it's my partner, my 2 daughters, and helping my daughters to understand that these people who are outside for you, and they are there outside, advocating for these yet to be United States to be who we said we were on paper in 1776. And so again, the world outside of our window does not feel like the world that we prepared to enter as teachers. And I'm really thinking about how we navigate that together. And because I want to navigate that together with you in this session, we've got a little bit of a warm up. Now, this warm up is an opt-in warm up, and I am going to facilitate this warm up just like I facilitate any activity with the students that I work with every day. And like the students I work with, I always say that everything that we do through this Zoom screen is an opt-in activity. That I recognize right now that for many of you, I am a guest in your living room or in your kitchen or in your bedroom or in your classroom. And so I always tell kids that you can do this work with your camera on, you can do this work with your camera off if you want, that I am not entitled to your bedroom or to your kitchen floor. And so you can work in the way that feels best for you. Now, so as we work today, here's how our warm-up is going to go. Now, I'm going to challenge you to find the oldest thing that you can find in the space that you're in right now, or the smallest thing that you can find in the space that you're in. Now, when I say go, don't start yet. I know some people are excited to start, but when I say go, you've got 1 minute. And when you return, I'm going to send you to a breakout room to talk about your object for 3 minutes, but you're going to have 1 minute to search the space that you're in to either find the oldest thing or the smallest thing that you can find in your space. Now, before I send you off to search, I want to be really clear about what I am doing here. So I planned this presentation today, not just with content, but I really thought quite intentionally about the methodologies that I am using today. And one of the things that we know is that, and we knew this in our analog classrooms, when we were back in our analog classrooms, we know that movement is an essential part of learning, that kids learn powerfully when learning can be integrated into things like movement. And so even when I am online or remote or virtual, I am always thinking about opportunities for kids to move. And so what I have built into this warm-up is an opportunity for you to move. We know that it is unhealthy and developmentally inappropriate to keep a kid glued to a computer screen for longer than 40 minutes. And so as I move through our content together today, I am not just thinking about the content that I'm sharing with you, but I am thinking about the methodologies that I am employing. So as you pay attention and take notes today, certainly pay attention to what I am saying, but also pay attention to how I am facilitating today's online experience. And so in this warm-up, again, you're going to have 60 seconds and you can go ahead and start now. You've got to find either the oldest thing or the smallest thing that you can find in your space. Again, you've got now 52 seconds left. And it is exciting to see people already thinking about what they're going to find. Oh, this is exciting, so cool. Again, you're either finding the oldest thing in your space or the smallest thing. Now, Stephanie, that looks cool. I cannot wait to discover what you've got there. Oh, it is so, oh, Angela, now that is exciting. And I see Laura here. Oh, wow. Now that is the coolest Meg. And Mina, oh, I absolutely love this. And so people are dashing about finding either the smallest thing or the oldest thing. We've got exactly 11 seconds left in our search. And people are making, oh my gosh, Sharon, I cannot wait to hear the story of that photograph. This is so powerfully, okay, Carmen, you're already my best friend. Carmen got a roller skate, y'all, and I'm ready to leave the session and go roller skating with Carmen. So, so this is so exciting. And so here's what I'm going to do. I am going to send you in a moment to breakout room to talk about the object that you found. Now in your breakout room, and again, I am really intentional about methodology. So here's how the breakout room works. When you get to breakout room, you'll be there with 3 or 4 other people. And if someone could please volunteer to be the reporter in each room. Now, reporter, your job is to check in with me about the ideas that emerge in your room. I'll be dropping into as many rooms as I can. This is one of the same protocols that I use with students. And so when I work with 2nd and 3rd graders, even when I work with 6th and 7th graders, this is one of the protocols that we have to be really clear with students about our expectations. And so this is me really being clear because I want all kids, again, to access a powerful experience, and clarity supports that access. Now we're going to use a mutual invitation protocol. So whoever volunteers to be the reporter, you get to share ideas first. Now, after that person shares, you welcome another person into the conversation by using their first name. Now, we know because we've all been socially distant for so long, kids are missing that developmentally appropriate social interaction. And so I am really intentional about having you employ first names with one another, because there's nothing more powerful, especially when you're a child, than hearing your own name. And I want to give kids like powerful opportunities to do that. Now, when you're invited into the conversation, again, this is opt-in, so you can pass or participate. So for example, if I were going to invite in Laura, I would simply show my object, talk about it, and then I would invite Laura in. And Laura has an option. She can pass or participate. And so that's how our breakout rooms are going to work. So when you get to breakout room, your job is to talk about your object. What is it? Where did it come from? Like, why is it important to you? How did you find it? And again, you're going to have 3 minutes in breakout room before I pull you back into this main room. So you will know, because I'm going to put a timer on your screen, so you'll know when it's time to come back, and it'll automatically pull you back. And so again, there are going to be 3 to 4 people in each breakout room, and you should be getting an invitation on your screen right now.
All right.
All right, so I'm going to just check out a few rooms and then pull everybody back into
Sure.
this main room in a moment. But do you need anything? How are you? You're good?
No, I found my oldest thing though.
Okay, awesome. I cannot wait to hear about it. And I pulled you into a room too. So yeah, I think I pulled you into a room as well. So you've
I
got
went
it.
into a room, but there was nobody in there. So I was like, I'll go back.
Oh, oh
I
no.
was in like room 16 or something.
Okay, let me check on there.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I'll hang out
Okay.
in the general session.
Okay. And so I'm gonna moving some people around who don't have anyone in their rooms. Okay. Awesome.
Do you know when they go into breakout rooms, do those rooms record?
They do not. So those
Okay.
are safe. And so I always like remind kids that yeah, those rooms are safe for them.
Okay.
Awesome. Into this main room after having shared. And so thank you for that sharing. And those rooms were so energetic. It was really exciting to be in those rooms. Now, as people come back into this room, I want to give you a few big takeaways already right now, based on just like the things that I heard you saying in the room. I got a chance to listen to Roy, and I talked to Lisa, and I heard Shira share a few things. I heard Almarie share a few things. And as I listened to you talk about the objects that you found, one of the things that strikes me is that everything has context, that there is a story that surrounds everything. Listening to Lisa talk about the shell that she found, and how she's not in her usual home, and so she wasn't really sure about finding something. All of that was context. Again, that there is a story around her experience and all of your experiences. And here's what we know as educators, that when we make decisions without an attempt at understanding context, we stand to do incredible harm to children and to communities. I am learning that we will never have powerful teaching until we can learn to think beyond the systemic constraints of school. That as I consider this moment now, we don't have to do it how we've always done it. Truthfully, how we've always done it isn't even appropriate for right now. And as we consider our work moving forward, embracing discomfort and conflict are essential prerequisites for our work. That as a teacher, I tend to be a risk or conflict averse kind of person. And so I am having to educate myself even in how to tackle things that feel challenging or big. I shared earlier this morning about the values that guide our work, that we value human-centered care, and we understand that no one learns from just listening to a teacher talk. We also understand that multiple literacies exist, and flexibility and creativity and innovation must define our work. Also, that justice matters. And as I apply these values to the work that we do every day, I have really been thinking about what I want to preserve in a remote or hybrid or socially distant learning environment. That when I think about access and what is important for kids moving forward, a couple of things come up for me that I wanted to name right here for you all, and then we'll begin to work around some of these things. But what matters in a big way is authentic connections among children. We know that children are twice as likely to learn from peers as they are from us. And so I am always thinking about how I am fostering and maintaining quite intentionally the authentic connections that kids have with each other. That even chiefs the connections that I have with kids, that I am one teacher, but if I can create powerful relationships or opportunities for relationships to bloom among kids, that's really powerful. Third, skill acquisition in this moment, when we think about all that we are striving to do with children in this challenging moment, it's important to recognize that for now, skill acquisition is more important than content acquisition. We know that skills transfer. So when I think about powerful phonemic awareness or reading or writing, or when I think about powerful like understanding of history or science or music, we know that skills can transfer from one academic context to another academic context, or from one practical context to another practical context. Skills transfer. Content can always be learned or Googled. And so when I think about the work that I do with kids, even in humanities, it is no longer as relevant that kids learn the name of every Revolutionary War hero when we study the 1770s. But it is important to understand historical motivations, or how to compare or synthesize or ask questions as we consider American or ancient or global history. When I think about what's important in this moment, like I often think about how kids can practice the skills that we're working on in these remote and hybrid and socially distant learning environments. We know that kids don't learn what we tell them, rather kids learn what they practice repeatedly. So I'm always thinking about using classroom time and space, if I have it, to craft powerful opportunities for kids to practice. That if all of the practices happens while kids are away from me, then the opportunity for feedback is lost. And so even when we're on computer screen, thinking about what practice can look like. And then for the times when kids are away, expecting that kids are gonna have to apply and practice these skills when there are very few adults in the home. I have been championing the reality that it is also not our jobs to keep kids busy. In this moment, it is our work to keep them curious. That as we figure out what it means to move forward, we know that kids will always opt into learning if they are curious. And so when I think about what busy work does, busy work actually extinguishes the flames of curiosity. And so in these times, I am doing everything I can to make sure that kids stay curious, that they're asking questions, and that I am engaging in the kinds of activities that really push their creativity. And so as we think today together, I'm about to use some of these beliefs to craft some experiences for us. And here's what I want you holding on to in your mind. That as I enter kind of our last bit of time together, our last 15 minutes together, I'm going to be building some things. And as I build the things, I want you to think about the values that guide your work as an educator, to think about your grade team, your subject area, your content team. What are the values that guide your work as an educator? And in these last 7 months, what have you discovered about yourself, about your students, your school, your community, the country, and the world? And then as I work over these next few minutes also, I want you to hold on to this question and nurture this question in your mind, that if I, Cornelius, could be your teacher fairy godmother and give you anything that would support you in meeting your needs and the needs of your students, what would that thing be? I'm planting these questions now. I'm going to double back to these questions as we end today, but I want to build a few things for you. that when I think about the challenges of this moment, given our values and the challenges that we're facing in this moment, the kind of school that we are looking to construct is we are looking to craft a reality where every kid can access an educational experience, of course, that allows them to learn in the ways that work for them, that affirms them, that grows them powerfully, that gives them access to rich opportunities in school and beyond, and also opportunities that keep them intellectually and emotionally and physically safe. And so when I think about what gets in the way then as we look across our educational landscape, and not every kid has access to those things. And so I've reflected a lot recently about what gets in the way. And it's when our actions don't match our values, when we measure our effectiveness and we when our measure of effectiveness is all about our institutional stability and not about children's success, access is limited, right? And we're gathered here today to study access. And again, in so many spaces, we think about, well, what's the thing that's going to keep the department running, or what's the thing that's going to be easiest for the grade team? But we rarely ever ask ourselves enough the question, well, what kinds of practices would ensure student success? And so again, when we measure our effectiveness, and when that measure is all about our institutional stability and not about children's success, access is abridged. When we create one size fits all realities, again, that limits the access that kids have. When we fail to question practices that don't work for kids, right? That sometimes we see that things aren't working for kids, and we remain committed to those things because that's how we do things here, or because that's what I was told to do. And so I, especially in this time that is defined by this pandemic and all of the creative solutions that we have had to craft in response to it, I am always questioning the things that don't work for kids and always ready to change those things. Again, when I consider what gets in the way of powerful experiences for kids, when we value compliance over learning. And one of the things that we know, and I'm going to name this clearly, that when we put assignments over learning outcomes, that abridges opportunity for kids and that limits access for kids. That we know that learning outcomes, especially right now, matter more than assignments. And so I'm always thinking, how can I help kids to reach the learning outcome, even if they do an assignment in a way that is different than how I might want it done, even if they choose a different path, even if they sketch a diagram when I was hoping that they would make a graph. Does what they did communicate their mastery of learning outcomes? And then finally, when we reduce school to transaction, that these are the things that get in the way. And so I've been thinking lots then, if these are the things that get in the way, how do I move these barriers out of the way? And this is what I really want to leave you with today, that we plan for this kind of equity of opportunity in everything. That when we utter words like equity, this is not incidental or separate from our work, that this is our work, that equity is the intentional redistribution of resources and the purposeful reimagination of ways of doing things in order to benefit those people who are most often left out of school, as we have always done it. And so as we plot a path forward for what learning and teaching can be, I am thinking actively about redistribution of resources and about how we reimagine the ways that we do things. Now, again, things keep staying the same. And so I'm going back to this idea that I borrow from Fannie Lou Hamer. And one of the things that she said in all of her civil rights work that she did is that imagination matters profoundly. That and she and her fellow freedom writers, John Lewis and so many others, one of the things that they said is that you are no good to any social movement if you cannot imagine tomorrows that are radically better than our current todays. And I think the same applies to our teaching right now, that we are no good for any academic movement if we cannot imagine academic tomorrows that are radically better than our academic todays. And when I think about how that imagination goes, I built for you today a bit of a protocol that I want to share with you. And then we're going to take a couple of rounds of using it, and then I'll let you go for the day. But I have really been thinking, if I want the kind of access that we all profess to value for all children, regardless of ability or social class or background, then I've got to be ready and willing to look at my own classroom, to look at my own department, to look at my own school, and to ask myself some really tough questions. When I look at my own classroom, I ask myself, who is most often left out in this classroom community? Now, as you consider this question for your own work, you'll know this because of things like grades or attendance or participation. And so I often then want to dig a little bit beneath the surface to discover what specifically are kids left out of. And once I name that thing, I get to reimagine that thing in order to give people more access. That the key here is that I work on fixing injustice, not kids, right? You know, that when kids are left out of school community, when it shows up in their grades, when it shows up in their attendance, when it shows up in their participation, often in school communities, we have historically blamed the children themselves. Rather, I am interested in asking myself, well, what is it that is marginalizing this student? And then how might I reimagine this thing to give those students more access? One of the things that I write about quite a bit in a lot of my research and scholarship is this reality that if there were something at school, some approach to doing school, some pedagogy or some curriculum at school that led to the mass failure of every kid with blue eyes, we would not run around our communities blaming kids with blue eyes and asking what's wrong with their parents. Rather, we would change the curriculum. But in these United States of America, we often don't extend those same graces to our girls, to our children of the global majority, to our students with disabilities. And so when there is a group of kids that is routinely underserved by school, the problem isn't the group of kids. The problem is like what we're doing in school. And so I have really taken this break in traditional learning to do that in number three, to reimagine the thing so that we can give people more access. And then of course I believe in action research, right? So then I test my ideas and collect data and reflect. And so here's what that can look like. And I'll be quite candid. In my own work, I have had to reimagine what it means to engage in remote learning. That I am teaching through screens most of the time. And when I look at who's most often left out in my school community here, it is the kids who had to wait for devices, right? It was, you know, and this B was a surprising group for me, but there was a cohort of kids that were really active when we were in-person school most of the time, but they are not as active remotely. And when I talk to some of them, they're like, well, it's hard to say things because my mom or dad or caregiver is nearby. And so the kids whose parents put a lot of pressure on them to perform are having a particularly hard time in my classes right now. Also, the kids who shared devices, you know, with younger or older siblings are having a hard time engaging right now. The kids who don't want their home on webcam, the kids who share a home with parents who are employed and not always there to support them. And so when I looked at my own classes, these were the kids who were most often left out. And so I used my imagination protocol. What are they left out of? And for me, it was specifically those shared class experiences where I would ask everyone to log on to Zoom at an appointed time, that those kids in these groups were most often not able to attend or perform or participate. And so here's what that means. That means that the problem isn't the students. That means that the challenge is that I've got to reinvent what it means to engage so that these 5 groups of students that I've just enumerated can have more of a shot at success. And so when I thought about what reinventing could look like, I had to reimagine again what it means to engage in remote learning. And so I made different options for engagement. Now, many of you in this room study universal design for learning. And so what I'm sounding is going to be really familiar to those of you who know the work of David Rose out of CAST. And so here is an example of how I reimagined our remote experience so that more kids could be successful. So I gave kids options. So again, you can come to the live class, but I also made my videos available after live class for those kids who couldn't always like log on time, or for the kids who couldn't always be engaged in that exact moment because they're taking care of younger brothers or sisters. But then I also created opportunities for kids to work with me or other teachers in order to reach the learning outcomes. I talk to kids all the time about how it's important to learn independently. So if you can't always be in my live class, that you can phone a friend and send me a screenshot of you working together with your friend, and that counts too. I also created opportunities for kids to do the thing on paper and send me pictures of the paper, or to reach out to me to co-create something that works for you. I even told some kids that learning is consensual. So you have the option to opt out of learning this thing as it is right now. But when you opt out of learning this thing as it is right now, that means that you're opting into a conversation with me so that I can better understand how to serve you. And one of the things, and what you see here is this is that imagination protocol at work that I had to ask myself. I am not okay with certain kids not having access, right? And so to stay committed to business as usual means that I am embracing and okay with the reality that certain kids could not access my remote experiences. And so I had to reinvent my remote experience so that more kids could have access. And so when we talk about the work of valuing all students, this is that work. You know, I've created opportunities for kids to study in non-traditional ways. One of the things that I know, especially for those of you who are my friends who are in elementary and middle and even in high school, the kids miss the opportunity to talk with their friends. And so as I thought about what engagement can mean, you know, that I would watch kids when we were in in-person school gathering in the corners of the hallway or in the cafeteria. And now our socially distant realities have taken that away from us. And so I've created spaces online for kids. You know, the NBA finals were a few weeks ago. And so I had groups of kids talking on Tuesdays about the NBA finals because that was happening. And that's what they would have been doing in school, that those were the connections that kept them tethered to school. And so I needed to recreate those connections even when we're doing school remotely, that so many of the kids were playing Animal Crossing. And so I created opportunities for them to connect with each other through that. So many of the kids have to care for younger siblings. So I made a support group so that those kids could come together to talk about what it means to take care of younger siblings when your parents are away. I even created story times for younger siblings so the kids could log in with their younger siblings and we could share read alouds together. You know, we talked about hip hop and rock and reggae, all of the things that interested kids because those were the things that kept them engaged in school when we were in person. And so I've had to think about how can I recreate those opportunities even though we're not always in person together. What you see here is active reimagination. Me being unwilling to accept that kids can come to school and not be engaged, or that kids are just naturally disengaged. Me trying everything I could to figure out ways to pull them in. That this is that radical imagination that Fannie Lou Hamer and John Lewis and so many of our others, other foremothers and forefathers talked about. And so as I close out my talk with you today, as I close out my work with you today, I want to again leave you with this idea that we can look at our current reality right now. We can look at the groups of kids who are underserved by our current reality, and we can imagine powerful ways to reach those kids that are also sustainable for us. And so it has been really, really exciting to work with you today. And I want to leave you with a little bit of time for questions. I saved this 5 minutes at the end to really begin to think through some of the things that are heaviest on your mind. I asked you a few reflective questions earlier to begin to think about. And so hopefully we can double back to those questions, but I'm going to pull my screen down just for a moment to give you an opportunity to kind of sit in our shared learning today. And here are 3 questions that I want to add to our earlier questions. As you think through all that I have shared this afternoon in this short session, what are the things that have really resonated for you in this time? Second, what are the things that are beginning to shift or change for you? And then finally, what persisting questions do you have? I want to give you 20 seconds to live in those 3 questions. Again, what has been confirmed for you so far? What is beginning to shift or change for you? And then finally, what persisting questions do you have? I want to give you 20 seconds to live in that kind of thinking. And then I'm going to invite folks to reflect together, first in breakout room, and then in this large room together. And then I will dismiss you promptly at 2:15. But I want to give you about 20 seconds to do a little bit of thinking. And now I am putting an invitation to breakout room on your screen. So you'll get an invitation in a moment. And I'm going to leave you in breakout room. just for 3 minutes. So it won't be a ton of time, and then we'll pull back here to kind of think about any last minute things. But in our short presentation today, what has been confirmed for you? What is beginning to shift or change for you? And then finally, what persisting questions do you have? You should see an invitation on your screen now. Everyone, as you are coming back into the room, it's so great to see you, Caroline. Welcome, Gwen and Mary. I am so excited to be here with all of you. Ms. Morris, Ms. Kennedy, welcome. Karen, hello, welcome. Um, and welcome back, Diane and Christine. Just again, thank you all of you for being here. As we come back into the room, again, 45 minutes is such a short amount of time to tackle such a big topic. But before I let you go, I wanted to do two things. First of all, thank you for your time here today, but not just your time here today, but for all that you do with, alongside, and for students. That there's so much right now expected of us, and just that you all approach the work with the sense of like fierce pride and advocacy that all of you have just means so much to me. And so before you leave, I wanted to thank you again for all that you do. And then the second thing that I wanted to do was, you only had a short time to talk in breakout rooms, and I know that some of us are exiting the room now, on our way to other sessions, but I did want to offer a few minutes. If anybody has any questions or comments or last minute thoughts, I'll hang out here. But in closing, I do want to thank you for all of the work that you do. And again, please know that we do not have to look back at March 2020 with a sense of nostalgic reverence. That as I hear folks talking all of the time, the phrase, let's get back to normal, is a phrase that continues to anger me, primarily because that normal that we left behind in March 2020 was a normal that left far too many kids at the margins. And as we move forward, we don't have to return to life pre-March, that we can use the power of our imagination and the power of our active labor in classrooms and in community to craft something that is radically better than that which we left behind. That I am not comfortable with the deification of pre-March 2020, but I am more interested in how we look toward a fully inclusive school environment for all people. So thank you, thank you, thank you for joining me today. I hope that today has been useful for you. If anybody has any questions, I'll be hanging out for a few minutes after the session. But please vote if you haven't. And good luck to all of you. Know that you've got a friend and an advocate in me. Thanks again.